Hello, welcome back to my channel. I see you books. I'm Camilla, and yes, I have a background with some books. I'm very excited to be bringing you something more interesting than my kitchen. Today, thank you for joining me. I decided, because I'm so excited about this new prize, to do a predictions video for the new Women's Prize for Nonfiction. So the Women's Prize Trust hosts the Women's Prize for Fiction every year, and it's my favorite prize to follow. Last year, I read almost the whole long list. I DNF'd one, but this year they're launching their first ever Women's Prize for Nonfiction. So yeah, very excited, like I said, and I want to join in the fun and kind of get excited about the potential books that might come out. So I've obviously read the teasers because I was like, will it be the same as the Women's Prize? You know, a lot of questions, and the answer mostly is yes, it will be very similar. So the long list is being announced on the 15th of February. And the long list will be 16 books, exactly like the Women's Prize for Fiction. Then the short list will also be 6 books, like the Women's Prize for Fiction, but this will be announced in March, end of March. And then the winner will be announced at the same ceremony as the Women's Prize for Fiction. And the books that are eligible, it's a very similar kind of bracket. So it's from the 1st of April of last year, 2023, to the 31st of March of 2024. So I've had to look back and look forward, and it's been really fun. And books that are eligible, I saw that books were only eligible written by one person, so it couldn't be like an array of people joining to write, or like a collection or something like that. But they say that books from all narratives and nonfiction categories are eligible. So that includes, but is not limited to, autobiography, biography, economics, history, memoir, mind, body, spirit, music, philosophy, politics, psychology, nature writing, science, self-improvement, smart thinking, and sport. So there was lots. And obviously this is the first prize, so I felt like when I was making my list, I was like, I actually don't know the vibe that they're gonna go for. If there's a genre they might prefer, but from the list there, they don't look like they do. They seem very open to all kinds of nonfiction by women. And yeah, so I'm very, very excited by this. And I just went with a list of 16, because that's what the long list is going to be. I do have 10 that didn't make my list that I'm going to just mention quickly at the end, just in case they might show up in the actual long list. And I mostly went by thinking of what a cohesive list might look like. So a lot of the books that didn't quite make my list were books that were maybe too similar to another one that did make my list. And I was like, I don't think 3 books about this specific subject might make it, but one of them might. I picked the one that I preferred, but the other ones are sort of there in the background of my list. So let's dive in with the 16, and they are in order of release. So we start in last year in 2023, and we head into March 2024. So the first book on my prediction list came out in May 2023, and it is On Our Best Behavior, The Price Women Pay to Be Good by Elise Loehnen. So Elise Loehnen is actually a journalist and kind of podcast host, I think. And she talks about basically the impulses that are often lauded as being of a feminine instinct, and basically how patriarchy has used things that we feel as ingrained in our culture to really control women throughout history. And I think something in the blurb was talking about the 7 deadly sins, social mores, or whatever. And I just thought that sounded really interesting. And also I feel like that kind of goes with potentially the Women's Prize, with the feminist element of it, talking about women's behaviors and stuff. So yeah, a potential contender. In second place, I decided very last minute to add the Tidal Year by Freya Bromley to my list. And this is because it was shortlisted for the Nero Book Awards. And I just thought it sounded really interesting, and it felt like the kind of narrative that is a personal memoir, but also ties in with nature. So I thought it kind of tied a couple themes. And this one came out in May 2023. So in the Tidal Year, Freya, the author, she says that for 4 years she's been looking for a way to fill the empty space after her brother's death. And she decides with a friend that they're going to swim every tidal pool in Britain. And that's kind of what sparks this book. In number 3, we have Monsters, A Fan's Dilemma by Claire Dederer. And this also came out in May 2023. And this I thought was really interesting because I felt very relevant to what is happening in the world, whether in film, in literature, just generally in the arts. So it's apparently a passionate, provocative look, an interrogation at how we experience art in the age of Me Too, and whether we can separate artists and art, and if we can appreciate it. In the blurb, they discuss a lot art by specific male filmmakers, but I feel like even in the book world, we know people that are very problematic, and I was like, can we read this? Should we really encourage that or like promote it, whatever? So I thought it sounded really interesting and relevant. Then let's get into June 2023. And we have Blue Machine, How the Ocean Shapes Our World by Helen, Czerski. And this is more on the environmental, it's about Earth specifically, that, at the heart of it, there's the ocean. And I think it's not going to mention like what lives in the ocean as much as the ocean as a machine and as like an ecosystem of it, like how it works basically. And I just thought that that's fascinating. I'm deeply scared of the sea, but also fascinated by it. And I thought that sounds like one that tackles theme, it's one, it's environmental, but it's also kind of geographical, but it's human as well. I mean, how could we live without water and all of that? So yeah, I'm very, very excited for this book. And I've added it to my TBR, obviously. Then in number 5, which it also came out in June, I added This Ragged Grace by Octavia Bright. This is a memoir. Octavia went through, a recovery from alcohol addiction. And this memoir is basically her journey to recovery juxtaposed with her father? Yeah, sorry. That was her grandfather, but it's her father's descent to Alzheimer. And I just thought it sounded like a really powerful memoir, and I just really wanted it on this list. Then I added All That She Carried, The Journey of Ashley's Sack, A Black Family's Keepsake by Tiya Miles. This came out in July 2023. And I added this actually after seeing it on the Bailey Gifford's Prize for Nonfiction in 2023. I think it was longlisted. And I just thought it sounded fascinating after reading the blurb. She's in 1950s South Carolina. Rose, an enslaved woman, faced a crisis. An imminent sale of her daughter Ashley. Thinking quickly, she packed a cotton bag with a few items. Soon after, the 9-year-old girl was separated from her mother and sold. Decades later, Ashley's granddaughter, Ruth, embroidered this family's history on the sack in spare, haunting language. So yeah, I thought it sounded amazing, and I feel like if it's been sort of endorsed by the Bailey Gifford, sounds wonderful. Next we have Wifedom, Mrs. Orwell's Invisible Life by Anna Funder. This came out in August 2023. Basically, the author was like really interested in George Orwell when she discovered more about his wife, which kind of a bit of a forgotten kind of figure, which I believe is Eileen O'Shaughnessy's. And it says her literary brilliance shaped Orwell's work. But why and how was she written out of history? And again, I thought it was wonderful. I really appreciate when we kind of not give back voices, but when we kind of bring to the forefront like people or voices that we may have not heard from before and that may have been erased. Like I'm thinking of The Five by Hallie Rubenhold, which I loved. So yeah, intrigued by this one. Next we have The Britannias, An Island Quest by Elise Albinia. This came out in October 2023. And this is basically the story of the British Isles and how they were woven into collective psyche. So it says, from Neolithic Orkney to modern-day Thanet, Alice Albinia explores the furthest reaches of Britain's islands, once known by the collective term Britannia. Sailing over borders between languages and genres, trespassing through the past to understand the present, this book knocks the center out to foreground neglected epics and subversive voices. Then we have Normal Women, 900 Years of Making History by Philippa Gregory. This came out also in October 2023. And you'll see why I mentioned how a lot of the books are similar. There was a lot of books about women in like history that came out last year. And this is the one that I thought would make it on the list, but we shall see. We never know. We have fallen into the belief that women were absent from great events. Through a radical reframing of the conventional eras of our history, Normal Women will tell the story of our nation, not with the rise and fall of kings and occasional queen, but through social and cultural transition, showing the agency, persistence, and effectiveness of women in society. Again, it ties with like the woman's kind of theme and voice and kind of place in history. Then, like, to branch out a little bit, I added Bad Taste or The Politics of Ugliness by Natalie Ola. This came out in November 2023. I just thought it sounded so interesting because, like, who decides what is ugly? Who decides what's good? Like, it's very much about cultural capital in that kind of sense. So this is the interrogation of the importance we place on seemingly objective ideas of taste in our culture that is saturated by imagery and the dangerous impacts that it has on our identities, communities, and politics. So yeah, I was kind of obsessed with it and I thought I would add it here as a bit of a wild card, it feels like, but I don't know, we'll see. Then number 11, we have Not the End of the World, How We Can Be the First Generation to Build a Sustainable Planet by Hannah Ritchie, which was just published in January 2024. Here in this one, I just thought that environment is one that often features in these prizes, and I feel especially on the long list of 16. I know I've already mentioned Blue Machine, but I thought this one sounded really interesting because it says we're bombarded by doomsday headlines that tell us the soil won't be able to support crops, fish will vanish from our oceans, and that we should reconsider having children. But in this bold, radically hopeful book, data scientist Hannah Ritchie argues that if we zoom out, a very different picture emerges. And I like the science bit. I just liked the hopefulness of it. And I thought those are two things that I can appreciate, especially with environmental books. So on my list it went. All right, so obviously I was in January 2024 then. All the rest of the books were published or will be about to be published because the next few books are in February and March. So I don't know if that many usually come out this late in the game, but again, we shall see. So the next book on my list is a memoir. It's called Splinters by Leslie Jamieson, and this is about to come out in February 2024. And this is a blend of memoir and criticism, and Jamieson actually investigates or looks really into details into one of the most important relationships in her life, and it's the one with her daughter. And basically she examines what it means for a woman to be many things at once: mother, artist, teacher, lover, etc., etc. And I just thought it sounded really interesting, really beautiful, poignant. Then we go back into history. How the World Made the West, a 4,000-year history by Josephine Quinn, which is also coming out in February 2024. It says, the West, history tells us, was built on the ideas and values of ancient Greece and Rome, which disappeared from Europe during the Dark Ages, and were then rediscovered by the Renaissance. In the bold and magisterial work of immense scope, Josephine Quinn argues that the true story of the West is much bigger than this established paradigm that leads us to believe. So much of our shared history has been lost, drowned out by the concept developed in the Victorian era of civilizations. I just thought it sounded wonderful and like questioning, how we've shaped history. So for a history book, I think that sounds very meta. So yeah, very interesting. And in number 14, we go back to a memoir again. It's called Grief is for People by Sloane Crosley, and this is about to be published again in February 2024. It says, for most of her life, Sloane and Russell worked together and played together. But then one day, while Russell is still alive, Sloane's apartment is broken into. When Russell dies exactly 1 month later, his suicide propels her on a wild quest to write the unwritable, to explore what constitutes family and possession, as the city itself faces the staggering toll brought on by the pandemic. I think this is based in New York City, for context. Yeah, again, I thought it sounded wonderful, like really poignant and intense. Grief is something I really like to explore. And also, I think, obviously, because this is sort of pandemic era-ish, I think it's kind of very relevant. But yeah, again, it sounded really interesting. We're almost there. Penultimate book, number 15, Just Friends, On the Joy, Power, and Influence of Friendship by John Yankovic, which is also coming out in February 2024. And this says basically Just Friend explores just friendship, that theme, in our world, what it means to be, to make, and sometimes to lose a friend. And it's a celebration of friendship, shining a light on the many different forms that they can take and the comfort they provide. Yeah, I just thought friendships are so important. And I feel like there's been lots about female friendships in the last kind of 5 years or something. So yeah, I thought this was a really interesting sounding book. And then number 16, we have Weathering, How the Earth's Deep Wisdom Can Help Us Endure Life's Storm by Ruth Allen, which is going to come out in March 2024. And I know this is going to sound very similar to the grief memoir, to the one about the planet, to one about history. I feel like it has all of that. But I think it's a very interesting thing because I think she's a geologist, but also an outdoor psychotherapist. What a combination. And basically she takes us on a journey like of the outdoors, but also for trauma and just how can nature teach us resilience in a sense. And I thought it was quite similar, but also I had to have it on my list. So yeah, so that's kind of what my list looks like. 16 really interesting books. They might all not make it up to the actual, long list, but yeah, a very interesting. I enjoy making predictions video because they're really fun to research, like ahead of the long list, I mean. And yeah, so that was really cool to do, and I've added a bunch of books to my TBR, obviously. And if you're interested, you can stick around for a couple more minutes as I just quickly go through the 10 books that didn't quite make the cut. The first one is The Woman Who Made Modern Economics by Rachel Reeves. This came out in October 2023. Then we have Vulture Capitalism, Corporate Crimes, Backdoor Bailouts, and the Death of Freedom by Grace Blakely. This is about to come out in March 2024, actually. Sorry, these aren't in order. They're in order of how I discarded them from my list. Then we have The Sisterhood by Lisa Mundy, which also came out in October 2023. Then we have Thunderclap by Laura Cumming. This is from July 2023. Then we have Crypt, Life, Death and Disease in the Middle Ages and Beyond by Dr. Alice Roberts, which is about to come out in February 2024. And I think this might be part of a series, so that's why I deleted it off my list. Then obviously I had to, on my first list, I had to have Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World by Naomi Klein, which came out in September 2023. Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. And then we have two of the history books that I just took off my list. There's Emperor of Rome by Mary Beard and Divine Might, Goddesses and Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes, which both came out in September 2023. So Normal Women is the one that made it on my list that I thought sounded very similar to these. One, Emperor of Rome, I was just like, just sounded too much like about how we've all talked about the last year about how men think of Rome. I don't know why. And then Divine Might, Goddesses and Greek Myth. And Natalie Haynes obviously was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, so maybe she's a darling of the prize, I do not know. But I just didn't feel like that book sounded interesting enough. But again, that's just personal, taste. Then we have Breaking Through by Kathleen Carrico. Just came out in January 2024. This is actually, I think Carrico won a Nobel Prize in Science. I don't remember which one. This is basically her life. And I thought it sounded really interesting. And also, love to hear about women in STEM. But also, I don't know how well that has been written or anything like that. So I left it off my list. And then I also had The Chain, The Relationship That Breaks Us, The Women Who Rebuild Us by Chimène Suleiman. That is coming out in March 2024. And that is because I kept the Just Friends, the book on friendship, instead. I think this book sounded a bit more about trauma. And yeah, I decided to go with the light choice. So yeah, so these are the 10 that didn't make my list. But I guess a good caveat to this video, which I should have done at the beginning, but here I am at the end, is that I didn't read any of these books, obviously. Lots of those I mentioned haven't even come out yet. So haven't read any of them. This is very much based on the topics, what it sounded like, some of the authors, obviously, because some of the authors are kind of more famous than others, obviously. So that's kind of why I've made this list. I look forward to hearing what you think, and I look especially forward to seeing what the long list actually looks like. So I'll be looking out on the 15th of February, and then I'll do a reaction video for sure. And also you can look forward to my predictions video for the Women's Prize for Fiction as well. That is coming out in the coming weeks as well. So thank you so much for watching, and hey, see you back. Bye!